If you're here now, I'd like you to get comfortable, let your shoulders ease down, and breathe like there's nowhere else you have to be for a while. Tonight, I want to tell you about something we overlook every day, something so soft and familiar that we forget it might hold the oldest secrets we've ever touched. They say water is just water, but what if every drop remembers where it has been, what it has seen, who it has held close? This isn't the kind of story that hurries to surprise you. It's the kind that lingers in the quiet corners of your mind, asking you to wonder gently, to stay open, to feel the hush inside your own pulse as you listen. If your eyes get heavy while we drift through this, let them. I'll still be here, speaking softly while you wander between waking and dreaming. So whenever you're ready, settle into your chair, your bed, or your secret listening place, and let's begin with a question that never stops flowing even when we look away. Outside my window tonight, there's an old metal bucket catching the last drops of a long, patient rain. Each drop lands with a tiny voice, like a fingertip tapping glass, and if I let my thoughts drift just enough, I can believe every drop has something to say about where it came from and where it's going next. I keep my mug warm in my hands, but tonight I'm not drinking tea or coffee, just plain water pulled from the faucet in my small kitchen that hums at night, when the pipes wake up like old bones stretching under floorboards. When I was a child, I used to believe the faucet had a memory. I'd stand on my toes and watch the stream splash against the metal sink, wondering if the water missed being a river or a lake or a secret pool hidden deep in a forest no one had found yet. Sometimes I'd dip my finger in the trickle and hold it up to the light to watch it run down my skin in a single silver path. Back then, I didn't know about molecules or the endless cycle that carries water from the sea to the sky to the ground and back again. I didn't know that when I drink this sip, I might be tasting something that once brushed the cheek of a woolly mammoth or drifted as vapor above a volcano that trembled the earth before stories were carved in stone. Even now it feels impossible that something so simple could hold so much. I lean closer to the window and listen for the drip. It reminds me of a clock, but slower, less insistent, as if time itself were being counted not in hours, but in small quiet moments of falling water. Somewhere out there, someone else might be listening to their own drip. Someone in a cabin deep in a forest where rain taps softly on a tin roof, or someone awake in a sleepless city where a leaky faucet echoes through empty rooms. I wonder if they too feel this quiet tug, this sense that every drop is not just a passing thing, but a tiny vessel carrying whispers from one place to another. Sometimes when the night grows long and my thoughts feel too big for my head, I think about how much water has passed through this house since it was built. How many people stood at this same sink, filling a kettle, washing an apple, rinsing a cut, tears falling unseen into the swirl of a draining tub. I imagine each droplet brushing past another, exchanging secrets before vanishing down the pipes, out into the soil or the river that winds behind the back fence. This river has been my quiet companion for as long as I've lived here. Some evenings I step outside and follow the worn path that leads down to the bank. It's never the same twice. Some nights it runs low and lazy, a silver thread under the moon, and other nights it swells with rain, carrying twigs and leaves like letters never sent. I stand at its edge and listen for the hum beneath the current, the low conversation of water rubbing stone, carving paths through layers of earth that might not notice until a tree's roots hang loose in the air where dirt used to be. I don't bring a flashlight. I let the dark wrap around my ankles like the water does. I trust my feet to find the slick stones, the soft mud, the whisper of grass at the river's lip. I stand there until my breath fogs in the cold and the river's secrets seep up through my soles. It feels like standing inside a memory too large to hold all at once. Sometimes I think that if I could just lie down in that shallow current, let the water slip over my ears and eyes, it might carry away the edges of me that feel too sharp in daylight. Maybe it would remember me kindly when it meets the sea, folding my small questions into its bigger story. Back inside, the old pipes groan as the house shifts in the wind. I think of them as the veins of this place, a network that hums and sighs in the night, bringing water to my faucet, my bath, my cup. I picture a single drop making its slow journey through rusted elbows and narrow bends, picking up flecks of iron and echoes of the houses it passed through before mine. There's something comforting about that thought, that what feels like mine alone is really part of something that moves beyond my walls and breath. That even as I stand here alone in my kitchen, I am connected by a slip of water to someone washing their hands across town, or someone washing dishes half a world away. When I drink again, the water is cooler than before, smooth against my tongue, tasting faintly of stone and air. I imagine it tracing its way into my blood, my cells, becoming part of the quiet machinery that keeps my heart steady while I stand at the window listening to the last drops find their place in the old tin bucket. Maybe tomorrow I'll pour that bucket onto the garden where the soil waits, dry and patient under the early sun. Maybe those drops will slip down to roots and pebbles, carrying my soft secrets with them. A slow, gentle exchange between what I am and what I might become. Outside, the drip falls again, softer now, spaced further apart. The house settles deeper into its hush, and somewhere in the dark the river keeps its course, remembering and forgetting, carrying all of us in pieces too small to see. I stand there a little longer, cup in hand, breathing the night's cool promise, wondering if somewhere far off, a single drop waits for me, holding an answer I haven't yet thought to ask. Ask ChatGPT. ChatGPT said. Morning arrives without announcement. It seeps in slow through the thin curtains, touches the glass of the window where last night's condensation has dried into faint rings and rivulets that remind me of the veins in a leaf pressed between pages of an old book. I sit up in the hush of my small room, feet brushing the cold floorboards, listening for the pipes again. A soft gurgle answers, a quiet signal that somewhere deep inside the wall's water is stirring itself awake too. I find it comforting, this hidden life that moves while I move, as if the house and I are breathing from the same deep well. I step outside with my cup empty, and my eye is not quite ready for the pale morning light. The air carries the leftover chill of the night, and the damp smell of earth still holding last evening's rain. I walk to the garden at the side of the house, a patch of soil that has learned my quiet habits, where a few rows of early greens lean toward the promise of sun. I lift the old tin bucket, heavier now with what it has gathered, and pour the water out in a slow arc. It splashes the dark soil, sinks into roots that spread beneath my feet in patterns I can only guess at. Sometimes I imagine if I could peel the earth back like the skin of a fruit, I would see the roots shining there, trembling with the memory of every rain that ever touched them. Maybe they remember storms that knocked at the roof when this house was young, or mornings like this one when I stand here barefoot, pouring last night's hush back into the ground. There is a small satisfaction in the simple spill of water into thirsty earth, like answering a question I can't quite form. I watch as the last drops slide off the edge of the bucket, hesitate for a moment in the curve of metal, then let go. I wonder where they will travel underground, what stones they will brush against, what old bones they might soak before they find their way to the river again. I have always liked the idea that the water I release here might surface far from me, lift as mist above a lake I'll never see, or gather in the cupped leaf of a plant that leans toward a different sun. It makes me feel less alone somehow, to imagine this quiet exchange, this gentle letting go and finding again. I set the empty bucket down by the fence and look toward the river. It's not far, a short walk through the trees that stand patient and unhurried, branches catching early light like hands learning how to hold it. Some mornings I carry my cup down there, and fill it directly from the shallows. I know the taste of it, cold, clean in a way that feels older than the pipes, older than the bucket, older than any promise I could make to myself in this soft dawn. I decide to go now, stepping lightly so I don't wake the house behind me more than I need to. The path is damp where leaves have kept the ground cool, and I like the way my footsteps make no sound at all for a few moments. Ahead, the river is waiting. It always is. When I reach the bank, I see how the water moves without effort, bending around a fallen branch, lifting a thin foam where stones break its surface. I kneel and dip my hand in. It's colder than I expect, a small shock that clears away the last threads of sleep clinging to my head. I watch the ripples spread from my fingers, racing each other toward the far shore where roots hang exposed and moss clings to stone like a soft green coat. The river's voice is a hush, never loud, always patient, a conversation it has with itself long before I arrive to listen. I lower my cup and let the current fill it. There's something old-fashioned about it, gathering water like this when a tap stands ready at home. But here I feel the taste of the river carries more than just minerals and cold. It brings a piece of the sky reflected back into itself, a scatter of leaves and soil, and the long breath of wind that stirred its surface before I came. I lift the cup to my lips and drink slowly, careful not to spill any back too soon. Each swallow feels like a small promise kept, like part of me joining a cycle I can't see but trust all the same. I close my eyes while I drink, letting the river's cold slip into the warmth of my throat, becoming part of my blood, my breath, my small ordinary thoughts that seem bigger when I'm here. The wind stirs the surface into shifting mirrors that catch the sun breaking through the trees. Light bounces across the ripples, dances on my hands, and for a moment I think about how that same light traveled an impossible distance just to scatter here, on this river, in this second. I like to imagine the sun's rays passing through vast empty miles, brushing dust and cloud, refracting through high cold air before finding the river's skin. It humbles me to think I stand here in that narrow chance, warmed by the same star that touches mountains and deserts and oceans far beyond what my feet will ever find. When I open my eyes again, I see small things that make this place feel like a living thought. A twig drifts past with a single yellow leaf clinging to it like a tiny raft. A pair of insects hover, touching the water's skin so lightly that the surface dimples without breaking. The current carries it all along, no hurry, no complaint, just the slow patience of what knows it will always be moving towards something larger. I think about how a single drop from this river might lift as mist when the sun grows stronger, rising unseen into the drift of clouds that roam above me now. Maybe days from now, weeks even, that same drop will fall as rain on a street I've never walked, trickle down a window I'll never press my forehead against. The thought makes me smile in a way that feels more real than the sun on my back. I finish the water in my cup and rinse it in the current, watching tiny bubbles break free and race away. I sit on the bank a while longer, feet in the soft earth, listening for answers I know won't come as words, but might come as a feeling I carry back with me when I stand and turn for home. The walk back feels different, the light now stronger, shadows shorter, the trees whispering overhead in a language I don't need to translate. I step through the fence and see the bucket waiting where I left it. I think I'll fill it again tonight, let the drops gather their small choir for the dark hours, when the house listens more closely than it does in daylight. I think about the roots drinking deeply below my feet, about the river curling away toward places I might never see. And I think about the next cup I'll lift to my lips, the taste of memory inside every swallow, the quiet proof that nothing we touch ever really leaves us, not entirely, not if we know how to listen. The afternoon drifts in without asking permission, carrying the slow hum of insects that hover above the garden, where the soil still remembers this morning's drink. I sit on the back step with my cup again, now filled from the tap inside, but I swear I can taste the river lingering somewhere in it, a faint mineral note that might be only in my head but feels true enough to hold on to. The sun has climbed high enough to lay its warmth across my shoulders, and I lean into it, letting my eyes slip half shut as shadows sway at the edge of my vision. Somewhere beyond the fence, the river keeps speaking in its steady hush, a voice I can almost hear if I stopped listening to anything else. There is something about afternoon light that makes time feel more like a suggestion than a rule. Minutes stretch out, slip over one another like the ripples I watched this morning, each one folding into the next without a hard edge to catch. I let my thoughts drift that way too, wandering to places I have not touched for years. I remember once when I was small and my father brought home a globe from a yard sale. Its colors faded, the lines of the country slightly smudged, as if the world itself had blurred at the edges. I used to spin it hard and press my finger down where it stopped, imagining that tiny point was where I might find myself one day, standing by a river not unlike this one, dipping my hands into water that had traveled a story I could not yet know. Even then, before I understood how clouds gather and rivers twist through valleys carved by time and pressure, I felt the pull of that hidden chain connecting all water together. I would spin that globe until my head felt dizzy with possibility, tracing rivers that crossed borders drawn by people but ignored by water, lines on paper that meant nothing to the soft insistence of a stream carving its path home to the sea. Now, years later, I think about that child sitting cross-legged on the floor, globe tilting under small hands, and I wonder if the drops I drink now once slipped through those imagined places. If they rose as mist above a mountain range I will never see, or drifted down a gutter in some forgotten city. I lift the cup again and swallow the thought down, letting it settle somewhere below my ribs where secrets wait to become part of me. A breeze slips through the yard, brushing the tops of the tall grass that leans at the fence line. I watch the way the blades bend, surrendering to the wind without protest, each movement a small lesson in letting go. Somewhere a crow calls out, its voice cutting across the hush like a dark line of ink on blank paper. I have always liked crows, the way they watch from fence posts and telephone wires, their eyes sharp and curious, never quite trusting but never fully gone either. They seem to know something about this world that I do not, something carried in the tilt of their heads, as they consider us with that soft suspicion that we might be missing the point entirely. I raise my cup in a silent toast to the crow perched now on the fence post at the far end of the garden. It watches me for a long moment, then lifts away with a single wing beat that carries it beyond the tree line where the river waits. I envy it for a heartbeat, that freedom to lift and drift without explanation or map, following the hidden currents of warm air and instinct. My own currents are quieter, shaped by the slow tug of habits and the soft pull of the river that keeps calling me back to its edge. I stand and set the cup down on the step, its rim catching the sun in a pale ring of light. I think I will walk again, back through the trees to the place where the river curves widest and the bank flattens out in a patch of sand that remembers footprints long after they have vanished from sight. The path welcomes me with the hush of dry leaves and the soft crackle of twigs underfoot. I move without hurry, letting each step find its place among the roots that weave themselves across the dirt like lines in an old story. The light shifts as I go, filtering through the canopy and broken coins that dance on my arms when I pass beneath. I reach the white curve and see how the sun lays itself across the water, turning it into a long ribbon of shifting gold. I step onto the sand, feeling the grit cling to my soles, and stand there a moment, just breathing, listening to the river speak in its ancient tongue. It's a language of touch more than sound, the gentle slap of water against a half-buried stone, the hush of a deeper current pulling beneath the surface where my eyes can't follow. I kneel at the edge and drag my fingers through the shallows, watching the tiny fish scatter away from the shadow I cast. I wonder what they know of this constant drift, this endless path they travel without ever leaving home. Maybe they feel the tug of memory in the current too, a soft reminder that even as they swim, they are part of something older and larger than the narrow space between one bank and the other. I cup my hands and lift a little of the river, letting it slip through my fingers in a cold braid that twists back into itself before vanishing. Each drop carries away a bit of my warmth, a small trade that feels fair enough. I think about the people who stood here before me, the hands that dipped into the same bin decades ago or more, the feet that pressed prints into the same sand now swept clean by wind and water. I like to think they felt the same hush, the same quiet certainty that the river knows us in ways we do not know ourselves. I lie back then, letting the sand take the shape of my shoulders, my spine, my heels pressing into its soft grit. Above me the branches sway, framing a piece of sky so blue it almost hurts to stare into it for too long. Clouds drift through, slow and deliberate, reshaping themselves without apology or explanation. I close my eyes and listen. The river's voice wraps around the rustle of leaves, the distant echo of a bird calling out, the steady whisper of my own breath slipping in and out. I think about how each inhale carries water too, tiny droplets suspended in the invisible weave of air, entering me without ceremony, becoming part of the blood that hums in my wrists and temples. I feel for a moment like a vessel too, no different from the cup I left on the back step or the bucket waiting for the next rain. A container for memory and drift and the endless conversation between what stays and what leaves. When I sit up again, the light has shifted, shadows leaning longer across the sand, the river's skin rippling with the promise of dusk not yet here, but on its way. I brush the grains from my palms and stand, turning once to watch the water slip past. I know I will come back tomorrow, and the river will welcome me the same way it always does, patient and unhurried, carrying its soft secrets beneath the surface where only the listening matters. Ask ChatGPT. Evening folds itself gently around my shoulders as I follow the path home from the river, the hush of leaves above me blending with the quiet beat of my steps on the soft dirt. There is a small comfort in knowing that while the world beyond these trees hums with roads and engines, and the restless chatter of lights flicking on behind drawn curtains, here the only noise that matters is the sigh of branches bending in the settling dusk. I hold my empty cup in one hand, a small reminder that the river's taste lingers somewhere deep inside me now, hidden in the quiet work of breath and blood that goes on without needing my permission. When I step into the yard, the garden greets me with the soft smell of warm soil giving back the day's sun. I see how the last light catches the tips of new leaves, each one trembling in the breeze that carries the first hints of night's cool promise. The bucket I left by the fence stands empty now, dry at the bottom where this morning's gift has long since slipped away beneath the roots. I think of it as an offering exchanged in silence, nothing owed, nothing kept except the memory the soil holds in secret. I set my cup on the step once more and ease myself down beside it, back pressed against the rough wood of the porch rail. Somewhere down the road a dog barks once, then falls quiet as if even that small sound realizes it does not belong in this hush. I tilt my head back and watch the sky find its deeper color, blue shifting towards something darker, stars just beginning to test the edges of what they will become tonight. I have always liked this in-between time, the soft hush that sits between day's last sigh and night's first breath. It feels like a hidden doorway, open for just a moment if you know where to stand. The first star appears above the far trees, not bright yet but certain. I think about the way its light has traveled so far to meet my waiting eyes, how it left its source before I was born and crossed the impossible dark to land here in this small yard where a single empty cup rests beside me on the steps. The distance is so large I can't hold it all at once in my head, but in this moment it feels gentle, like a story whispered by someone who trusts you to keep it safe. I wonder how many times the river has caught that same starlight on its restless skin, bending it into small glimmers that drift along the current and break apart against stones older than any memory I could claim as my own. I close my eyes and think about the water flowing in the dark now, carrying the same secrets it carried this morning, folding my reflection into itself and carrying it away to places I will never stand. There is a strange comfort in knowing that part of me drifts there now, hidden in the soft swirl beneath the moon's first glance. When I open my eyes again, the sky has gathered more stars, each one settling into its place like grains of salt scattered across a dark cloth. I breathe in the night and feel it fill the spaces daylight leaves behind. Somewhere inside the house the pipes sigh again, a small reminder that even here, with my feet bare against the cool wood, the quiet cycle continues unseen. I imagine a droplet traveling through the copper veins behind these walls, brushing against bends and elbows, carrying a trace of iron and the faint echo of my breath. Maybe by morning it will be part of the sip that touches my tongue before the sun lifts its head above the garden fence. I think about how many cups I have lifted in this life, how many sips I have taken without wondering where they began. It is so easy to forget that every swallow ties me to the clouds, to rivers winding through countries I may never touch, to snow melting on distant peaks I will only know through photographs and half-formed dreams. Even here, where my world feels small enough to hold between two hands, the vastness presses close in every drop. A moth drifts close to the porch light I have not yet turned on, its wings brushing against the fading color of dusk as it searches for something it may not find. I watch it hover, drawn by an instinct older than memory, and I think about how light calls to water too, how the sun lifts it from oceans and lakes and rivers, pulling it skyward where it gathers and waits until it can no longer hold its shape. Then it falls again, soft as a promise, feeding roots and rivers and small gardens behind quiet houses. It feels like a conversation that never ends, a question asked and answered over and over in a language I can almost understand if I sit still enough. I rise from the step and carry my cup inside, the door creaking in the quiet as if it too wants to remind me that this place is alive in its own small way. The kitchen hums with the soft tick of the old clock above the stove, the same clock I remember watching when I was young and restless, waiting for water to boil while shadows crept along the corners of the floor. I turn the tap and fill my cup once more, watching the thin stream bend and shiver as it finds its resting place. The pipes rattle faintly behind the walls, a reminder of the long hidden path each droplet takes before it touches my hands. I lift the cup to my lips and sip, tasting the quiet metal note of the faucet, the echo of the river folded somewhere inside, the ghost of the rain still waiting its turn in the soft promise of tomorrow's clouds. The water cools my tongue, slides down my throat, becomes part of me again in ways I cannot see but trust without needing to. I stand there for a while, cup in hand, listening to the house hold its breath around me. The clock ticks on, steady and patient, each second a small drop falling into the pool of this night. Outside the window, the garden waits in the dark, the soil turning each drop into roots and stems, and the soft green promise of life that will rise with the sun. I think about how tomorrow I will carry the bucket to the fence line again, how I will watch the water slip into the earth and imagine the quiet paths it will take beneath my feet. I think about the river waiting under the trees, its voice constant even when I do not stand at its edge to listen. And I think about the sky above it all, the soft drift of clouds gathering the hush of the sea into themselves before releasing it again, a cycle too large to hold but small enough to taste in a single sip. I finish the water and set the cup in the sink, the last drop sliding down its sides in slow lines that catch the kitchen light. I breathe in the hush one more time before I turn off the tap, before I flick off the switch that sends the house deeper into its waiting sleep. When I step outside once more, the stars are waiting for me, patient as ever, scattered above the trees where the river drifts unseen. I stand barefoot in the dark, feeling the chill slip up through the boards and into my skin, and I listen for the memory inside every drop that has passed my lips tonight. A memory I trust will carry me gently through sleep toward whatever quiet tomorrow has waiting just beyond the garden fence. Ask ChatGPT. I wake before the sun lifts its head above the trees, the house still wrapped in that fragile hush that belongs only to the hour between dreams and daylight. I lie there a moment, eyes open to the dim shape of the ceiling, listening for the old familiar sigh of the pipes as they stretch and settle behind the walls. I think I can hear them humming softly, carrying water through dark veins to places that will wake soon enough to the sound of the kettle's whistle, or the tap running over cold hands rinsing sleep from faces not quite ready for the day. I slip from bed and find my way to the back door without turning on any lights, wanting to hold on to this thin layer of night as long as I can. The grass is wet beneath my feet when I step outside, dew clinging to my soles like a memory I haven't formed yet. Above me the sky carries the first pale edge of dawn, the stars dissolving one by one into the growing promise of light. I breathe in the cold air and taste the ghost of rain that must have passed overhead while I slept, leaving its secret behind on the garden leaves and the old tin bucket by the fence. I walk to it now, lifting it gently, feeling the weight of what it has gathered while the world dreamed. I pour a little at the base of the nearest plant, watching how the soil darkens and drinks without question. I wonder how deep the water will slip, how many stones it will brush in the dark underground, what small roots it will cradle on its way to some hidden pool I will never see. There is comfort in this slow release, in knowing I am part of a quiet ritual that repeats itself in gardens and fields and forests far beyond this fence. I set the bucket down and stand still for a while, letting the damp morning hold me where I am. Somewhere behind the trees the river waits, carrying pieces of this same night toward places I can't name. I think about that unseen path winding through shadows and over stones worn smooth by centuries of soft persistence. I wonder if the river feels the weight of the sky pressing down on its surface, if it notices the way the dawn pulls color across its back like a brush dipped in pale paint. I step back into the house and fill my old mug from the tap, the cold slip of water ringing against the ceramic in a sound that reminds me of rain tapping glass in the deep hours when sleep will not come. I lift it to my lips and drink slowly, tasting metal and stone and something softer, something that might be the echo of the river folded into the hidden twist of pipes and rust. I think about how easily I forget this taste belongs to more than just me, that it carries the hush of clouds drifting high above fields I have never walked, the breath of wind rising from the sea to kiss the belly of a passing storm. I carry my mug to the window and stand there as the sun climbs higher, pushing shadows back into corners they do not fight to stay in. The garden glows now in the new light, droplets clinging to leaves like small jewels waiting for a hand to brush them free. I wonder how long it will take for the sun to lift them into mist, invisible threads rising back toward the sky that waits to gather them again. It feels like an old promise, this lifting and falling, a soft agreement between earth and air that nothing stays forever, but nothing truly leaves either. I sip again and close my eyes, letting the warmth of the light find my face through the glass. I think about how the river must look now in this first stretch of morning, the surface trembling with the breath of wind moving low through the trees. I imagine a single droplet catching the sun, bending its light into colors I cannot see but trust are there just the same. I think about how the droplet might rise as mist before noon, drift into a cloud that drifts across counties and towns where other people stand at other windows, lifting mugs to lips in kitchens that smell of toast and sleep and quiet hope. I like knowing I am not alone in this simple act of drinking water that has carried so many stories before finding its way here. I finish what remains in my mug and set it in the sink without washing it just yet, leaving the faint ring at the bottom to dry in the soft warmth of morning. I pull on an old sweater and slip my feet into boots that wait by the door, their laces frayed but dependable, their soles holding the memory of countless walks to the river and back. I step out again and close the door behind me with a quiet click, the sound small against the larger hush of the yard waking under the sun's slow gaze. The path is soft with last night's rain, each step pressing a gentle shape into the earth that will fade before noon when the sun calls the moisture back into the sky. I like that these marks do not stay long, that the world does not hold every footprint forever, but folds them back into itself like a secret. The trees greet me with the rustle of leaves stirred by a breeze that still carries the edge of night's cool breath. I follow the bend of the path down to the river, feeling my heartbeat match the steady pace of my steps. When I reach the bank, I see how the surface shivers with the light, the current folding sky and shadow into a single drifting thought. I kneel at the edge and dip my hand in, feeling the cold slip around my wrist, washing away the warmth of my palm without effort. I watch the ripples spread and fade, their small circles carrying a piece of me outward to where the river turns out of sight. I imagine that part of me moving on, brushing against stones and fish and fallen branches caught in the slow drift. I imagine it lifting again when the sun grows stronger, rising unseen into the promise of clouds that wait to gather what they need before giving it back as rain somewhere far from here. I sit on the bank for a while, letting the river's voice fold into the hush inside my head. I think about how the same water has been here long before me and will be here long after, patient and unhurried in its endless conversation with the land. I wonder if the fish beneath the surface know they swim through history with every flick of their fins, if the stones remember the cold press of glaciers that once passed overhead, carving the valley that cradles this bend where I sit now. I lean back on my hands and tilt my head to the sky, letting the sun warm the skin the river's cold left behind. Clouds drift overhead, their shapes soft and careless, folding and unfolding like thoughts that pass before I can name them. I breathe in the smell of water and earth and something green and alive. I think about how much of me is made of water, how every drop in my blood and my bones has been borrowed from this same restless cycle that knows no end and no beginning. I close my eyes and listen to the quiet rush, the gentle slap against roots that lean toward the current as if they too crave the touch of what moves past them without staying. When I stand at last, brushing sand from my palms, I feel lighter somehow, as if the river has taken some small worry I did not have words for yet. I turn back toward the house, the path waiting like a soft ribbon leading me home through the hush of trees and the whisper of wind. Behind me the river keeps its steady voice, carrying pieces of me forward into places I will never stand, carrying memories I will never see but trust are there all the same, waiting to find their way back into my cup one quiet morning when I lift it once more to my lips and taste the memory inside every drop of water. Ask ChatGPT. By the time I return to the house, the morning has settled into a soft hum, the kind that drifts through open windows carrying the promise of warmth and the quiet insistence that time can stretch when no one is looking. I stand on the step for a moment, boots still damp with riverbank sand, and listen for the house breathing around me, the faint click and sigh of old wood adjusting to the sun's slow push against the roof. I think about how long this place has stood here, catching rain on its shingles, funneling water through hidden veins that weave behind plaster and brick. There is comfort in old things that know how to hold a hush. I slip inside and set my boots by the door, feeling the floor cool under my bare feet. In the kitchen the clock marks the morning with its steady voice, a soft tick that seems to say don't hurry. Nothing is late if you don't look at the hands too closely. I fill the kettle and set it on the stove even though I know I'll drink water more than tea, but the sound of it coming to a boil is its own kind of company. The kettle has been here longer than I have, its handle worn smooth where countless fingers have lifted it through seasons, when the wind pressed hard against the windows, or when summer drifted in so gentle the doors stayed open all night. I lean against the counter and listen to the soft swell inside the kettle, the small swirl of water remembering the river in its own way. Steam coils up and drifts toward the ceiling, disappearing before it can touch anything solid, a quiet ghost folding back into the air that waits to gather it again. I pour what I need into my cup and step to the window where the garden sits in its neat rows, the soil still damp from the early spill of the bucket. Sunlight catches on the leaves, a shimmer that shifts when the breeze leans through, and I think of how each root beneath that calm surface is busy pulling what it needs from the secret network below. The thought steadies me, knowing life hums on even when I cannot see it. I take a sip and the warmth slips down, simple and honest, carrying no more than what it must but still reminding me that even boiled water was once mist above a restless ocean or a drop balanced on the tip of a pine needle waiting to fall. I carry my cup to the back porch and settle onto the old chair that creaks a little under my weight, the same way it always has, its joints softened by years of small drizzles, and the patient scrub of wind pushing dust across the planks. From here, I can see the narrow gap between trees where the river runs, hidden by shadows, but impossible to forget. It feels good to be still, to hold this cup, and know that my heartbeat matches the hush of leaves overhead. Birds pass through the branches, one darting low to the fence post where it tilts its head and studies the garden as if deciding where to land next. Its feathers catch the sun, and for a moment, they flash a color so bright I almost forget to breathe. Then it flits away, the branch bobbing once as if waving goodbye. I sip again, and feel the warmth settle in my chest, radiating outward like a memory I did not know I kept. Somewhere inside the house the pipes tick, a faint echo that reminds me this water has traveled far before touching my lips. I imagine it moving through darkness, brushing the rough walls of old iron, gathering traces of stone and time, bending around corners, and slipping through narrow bends that twist like the roots under my garden. I wonder if it remembers each turn, each moment of pause in some hidden reservoir where it waited for the soft pull of gravity to send it forward again. It feels strange and comforting to think that the water I drink carries so many places inside it, that every swallow is a quiet map drawn in droplets that know more about the world than I ever will. I let my eyes drift closed for a moment, and listen for the river's hush hidden beneath the hum of morning. It is there if I reach for it, that steady voice folding the sky into itself, carrying bits of leaf and root and lost secrets along the curve of its patient spine. I see it in my mind as a ribbon that ties this small porch to somewhere distant and unseen, a thread that runs beneath roads and fields and the restless pulse of towns that sleep too lightly to notice what moves below. I think about the people who stand at their own windows now, lifting cups to lips just like I do, not knowing how our sips are linked by what drifts through pipes and clouds and rivers that twist far from any map we keep in drawers. Maybe someone else tilts their head to the sound of water boiling, the same low sigh that fills this house when dawn softens its edges, and the wind stands still for a moment to listen. I open my eyes again and watch the light slide across the porch, catching the rim of my cup and turning it into a small circle of sun I hold in my hands. I tip the last swallow onto my tongue, letting it linger there a moment before it slips down, joining the unseen currents that keep me standing here, soft and rooted like the garden waiting beyond the rail. The wind stirs again, and I hear the bucket by the fence tap once against the wood where I left it empty. It waits for tonight's rain or tomorrow's drizzle, ready to catch what the sky offers without question. I think I will leave it there, a quiet promise that I will remember to listen when the drip starts its soft tap against metal, a signal that the world's oldest story still moves through the air above my roof. The kettle inside clicks as it cools, the last drift of steam folding into the morning air that wraps itself around my shoulders like an old shawl. I breathe in the hush and stand, carrying my cup back inside, where the shadows have shifted across the floor, long lines stretching toward corners where the sun has yet to reach. I rinse the cup under the tap, listening to the short hiss of water filling the basin, the swirl of droplets finding the drain and slipping into pipes that lead back toward the river's waiting arms. I watch a single droplet cling to the rim before falling away, and I wonder where it will travel next, what stone it will brush, what root it will cradle as it drifts beneath streets and fields and forgotten places that only water remembers clearly. I turn off the tap and dry my hands on the edge of my shirt, feeling the small damp patch press against my skin like a memory waiting to become part of the fabric. I stand for a moment in the kitchen doorway, looking out at the garden and the stretch of trees that hold the river's secret voice in their shaded arms. I think about how this day will unfold in slow ripples, each moment folding into the next like water finding its way around a stone. I know I will walk to the river again before the sun dips low, will stand at its bank and listen for the hush that carries my quiet questions forward into the soft places where all things drift when we let them go. I know I will lift my cup again, sip what the sky has given, taste the memory inside every drop and feel, for a breath or two, that I am part of something that moves on, asking nothing more of me than to listen and let it pass through without trying to hold it too tightly. Ask ChatGPT. By late afternoon the light shifts again, slipping through the windows in long warm shafts that catch motes of dust drifting in their slow dance through the still air of the house. I watch them move, as if they have somewhere quiet to be, tiny pieces of things once solid now given permission to float and settle wherever the light lets them pause. I think about how every bit of dust was something else once, how even the water in my cup has carried specks of stone and salt and lost whispers before finding its way through pipes to my waiting hands. I set the empty cup in the sink where a small ring of water clings to the inside, a reminder that every swallow leaves behind something that doesn't quite want to go. Outside the hum of late summer insects rises and falls in soft waves that brush against the garden fence. The plants stand taller now than they did in spring, their leaves broad and open, catching sun and shadow in equal measure, as if they know each is needed to keep the roots strong below. I slip my feet back into my boots, the leather warm from where they rested by the door, and step outside with the bucket swinging gently from my fingers. There is no rush to this part of the day, just a quiet agreement between the fading sun and the waiting earth that what comes next will arrive at its own pace. I carry the bucket to the far side of the garden, where the soil dips low near the fence line. It's there I like to stand and watch the light shift across the yard, how the shadows stretch and lean like long fingers trying to touch something just out of reach. I rest the bucket down and crouch beside the plants, pressing my palm flat against the damp earth. It gives a little under my hand, warm and alive with the memory of last night's rain and the steady patience of roots I cannot see but trust are there, weaving through the dark like soft threads pulling the whole garden together from underneath. I dip my fingers into the bucket and let the water slip through them in a slow trickle that soaks into the soil without complaint. It feels good to give back what the sky has offered, to know that every drop carries with it a piece of the river's story, the whisper of clouds drifting high above fields I've never walked. I watch the last few droplets cling to my skin before they fall, leaving behind the cool trace that fades almost as quickly as it appears. When the bucket is empty, I set it aside and stand, brushing the dirt from my palms onto my jeans. The air smells of green things, and the faint edge of dusk waiting its turn just beyond the tops of the trees. I walk toward the river again, not because I need anything but because it feels right to stand there, as the day folds itself into evening. The path welcomes my steps with its soft bend through the trees, the branches overhead catching the last scraps of sunlight and breaking them into shifting patterns on the ground. I like to think the river knows I am coming, that it listens for my quiet tread through the brush and the gentle break of twigs under my boots. By the time I reach the bend, the air has settled into that hush that belongs only to late day, when the wind drifts away and the birds slip deeper into the leaves to rest. The river's surface catches the sky's reflection now, a long ribbon of soft gold and bruised blue where daylight and dusk meet for a breath before letting go. I stand at the edge and watch the current slip past, carrying pieces of light and shadow in equal measure, folding them into its steady conversation that never once pauses for anyone listening on the bank. I kneel and reach down, letting my fingertips brush the cool skin of the water. It accepts my touch without protest, splitting around my fingers before rejoining itself a moment later, as if my presence here changes nothing and everything all at once. I think about how many people have stood here before me, hands dipped in this same bend, hearts carrying questions the river kept without judgment. I wonder what secrets it holds deep beneath its surface. Stones polished smooth by centuries of drift and collision, roots that reach down like searching hands toward the soft murmur below. I sit back on my heels and close my eyes, breathing in the smell of water and damp earth, and the faint sweetness of wildflowers that cling to the bank where the grass thins. I can almost hear the distant echo of rain gathering somewhere far upstream, clouds thickening and deciding when to let go, how much to give, where to send the drops that will one day slip through my pipes and fill my waiting cup. I think about how the sky's patience mirrors the river's persistence, both moving in their own slow dance that knows no hurry and no end. I open my eyes to watch the ripples where my fingers touched, still widening outward in circles that carry my small moment further than I can see. I stand and step closer, the toes of my boots brushing the wet edge where water meets land. If I listen closely, I can hear the soft slap of the current against a half-buried branch that juts from the bank, its bark dark with years of the river's touch. The sound is steady and simple, a reminder that the river asks for nothing but gives back everything if you know how to stand still long enough to notice. I take a step back and sit on a broad flat stone warmed by the last light. From here, I can see how the trees lean in over the water, their branches reaching for their own reflections before drifting back with the wind's slow breath. I watch a single leaf break free, spinning once before it lands on the surface and joins the quiet drift downstream. It bobs and turns, a small boat carrying nothing but its own lightness, yet I like to imagine it holds a memory too, a whisper of wind, a moment of shadow, the soft pull of roots that once held it high before letting go. I stay there as the sun slips lower, watching the way the sky darkens in slow folds, how the first stars flicker to life above the tree line. The river holds their glow too, bending starlight into ripples that carry it forward long after my eyes lose the sharp edges of each point of light. I think about the water in my cup waiting at home, how it carries this same reflection inside it, how every swallow ties me to this hush, this bend in the river, this quiet promise that what drifts away always finds its way back in some shape or another. When I stand at last, the night is close enough to touch, the air cool against my cheeks, the sound of the river wrapping itself around my shoulders, like a soft blanket of moving time. I follow the path home slowly, boots pressing fresh prints into the damp dirt that will hold them until the wind or the next rain smooths them away. The house glows ahead with a warm spill of light through the kitchen window, waiting for me to step back inside with river scent still clinging to my skin and the memory of moving water tucked safe behind my ribs where I keep all the quiet things I do not yet have words for. Ask ChatGPT. The door closes behind me with the softest sound, a hush that folds itself back into the warm pocket of air inside the house. I stand there a moment on the mat just beyond the threshold, boots still damp with the memory of the path and the river's edge, and I let the quiet greet me like an old friend who never asks why I've come home so late. The kitchen holds a small pool of lamplight, spreading its glow across the worn counter where my cup waits, rinsed clean, but not yet put away. I pick it up and turn it in my hands, feeling the smooth lip catch the lamp's glow like a thin ring of moonlight caught in the curve of my fingers. There's something comforting in this small ritual, this simple object that knows the shape of my mouth better than any mirror could. I carry it to the sink and fill it again, listening to the water strike the sides with its soft hollow note. It feels different to drink from the tap after standing at the river, but the thought of that hidden path from cloud to stream to pipe to cup settles me in a way that makes this swallow taste like more than water. I tilt my head and sip, feeling it slip past my teeth, cool and clean, reminding me how much of my own body belongs to this same patient cycle. I lean my hip against the counter and look out the small window above the sink, the glass showing only a dark stretch of night broken by the faint suggestion of the garden fence and the glimmer of dew already gathering on leaves that know how to drink while the world sleeps. I wonder if the river's voice carries this far, if the hush of it finds its way through the dark and folds itself into the sigh of old pipes behind these walls. I imagine droplets brushing metal, pausing in small pools where rust clings to the edges like forgotten dust, then pushing onward through the maze until they land here, waiting for my hands to lift them into light again. It's an old story told without words, one that started long before this house was built and will outlast it too, drifting forward drop by drop while I stand here filling a cup in the hush of my small kitchen. I finish what's left and rinse the inside with a slow swirl of my wrist, watching how the last film of water clings to the porcelain before slipping down the drain. I set the cup upside down on the towel by the sink and run my fingertips over the soft cotton edge, grounding myself in the simple feeling of fabric and skin, and the low tick of the clock behind me counting time in seconds that feel unhurried enough to keep. I move through the house on quiet feet, the old floorboards giving just enough to remind me they know my weight and welcome it anyway. I reach the back door again and step out onto the porch where the air is cooler than I expected, brushing my bare arms with a faint edge of river breath carried on a night breeze that slips through the trees and finds every gap between clapboard and rail. I sit down on the steps and press my palms against the wood, feeling the rough grain hold the warmth the sun left behind, a small gift that lingers long after the sky has folded into darkness. I tilt my head back and let my eyes find the stars scattered above the yard. They look softer from here than they did at the riverbank, as if the distance between earth and sky has closed just enough to let their small fires breathe a little closer to where I sit. I pick one and follow its shimmer with my gaze, tracing a line through the hush that carries me beyond what my eyes can hold. Somewhere up there are clouds drifting slow and patient, carrying their hidden cargo of water that waits for the right moment to fall. I wonder if tonight they whisper to each other in a language made of hush and drift, deciding where to release their gathered drops, how to scatter them so that each one lands exactly where it's meant to be. I imagine one droplet drifting down through the cold dark, brushing leaves on its way, sliding along the edge of a gutter, pausing on the lip of the tin bucket waiting by my fence. Maybe it will tap out a small note that I'll hear from my window, a single syllable of a much older sentence that has no need for a final word. The thought settles into my chest like a soft stone, grounding me in a way that no loud promise ever could. I sit there long enough to feel the night lean closer, the breeze brushing my hair across my forehead, the distant pulse of the river blending with the low hum of insects waking in the dark. Somewhere an owl calls out, its voice so soft and certain it seems to belong more to the shadows than the trees that cradle it. I imagine its eyes catching starlight the way my cup caught the lamp's glow, reflections folded into feathers, and carried on silent wings through branches that never question who watches and who drifts unseen. When I stand, I carry that hush with me back inside, slipping the door closed behind my shoulder so gently the latch hardly clicks. I pause in the entryway, letting my eyes adjust to the warm pocket of lamplight still spilling across the kitchen tiles. I think about the droplets that still linger in the pipes, curled around rusted corners, waiting their turn to slide forward into the next cup, the next rinse, the next sip that will carry them through someone's throat into the quiet echo of their own blood. I like to think we're all just brief containers for this patient current, that every heartbeat is a reminder we are not separate from what drifts beneath our feet but shaped by it, folded around it, made whole by its soft insistence on moving forward no matter how many walls we build to catch or guide or claim it. I stand there a little longer, listening to the clock mark the moment in small, even ticks. Each one feels like a drop falling into a pool I cannot see, but trust is there, hidden just beyond the reach of my tired eyes. When I finally turn off the lamp, the kitchen sinks into its own dark, the window showing me only the faintest reflection of my shape standing barefoot among shadows that stretch toward corners where daylight will find them again soon enough. I carry the hush of river and sky and old pipes with me down the hall to my small room, where the window stays cracked just wide enough to let the night breeze slip in. I lie on my side, listening to the soft creak of the bed as it remembers the shape of my back, the rhythm of my breath folding into the sound of wind brushing the eaves. I close my eyes and imagine the river still drifting beneath the trees, carrying stars across its surface like lanterns that never burn out. I think about the droplet waiting on a leaf above my garden, how it might slide free before dawn and land in the bucket where I will find it tomorrow, lift it to thirsty soil, watch it slip below the roots where it will join stones and threads and secret hollows that remember every drop that came before. I fall asleep before I can hold the whole thought together, trusting that somewhere in the hush of my dreams the memory inside every drop of water keeps drifting forward, carrying pieces of me with it into places I will never stand but somehow already know by heart. Ask ChatGPT. When I wake, the room is still folded in half-light, the soft gray that comes just before the sun commits to its slow climb above the trees. I lie there for a moment listening to the hush that drapes itself over the house, the faint creak of wood settling deeper into its joints, the ghost of wind brushing against the window where a single drop of water clings to the glass, like a small promise waiting to be kept. I imagine it has been there for hours, gathering itself from the mist that drifted in while I slept, a quiet visitor that left behind this tiny beat of memory for me to notice when I open my eyes. I swing my legs over the side of the bed and feel the floor cool beneath my feet, grounding me in the present before my thoughts slip too far into the quiet pathways they always find before dawn has finished its slow stretch across the sky. The house feels larger at this hour, its corners deeper, its shadows softer, as if it too is caught in that thin space between dreams and waking where everything hums with the memory of what came before. I make my way to the kitchen, the air carrying the faint chill of the night that has not yet burned off. My cup waits for me by the sink, turned upside down where I left it, dry now except for a faint ring that catches the window's early light like a whisper of the water it once held. I turn it over and run the tap, listening to the rush of water fill the small hollow space until it brims just shy of spilling over. I lift it to my lips and drink slowly, tasting the faint metallic echo that always comes at first sip, a reminder that even this water has passed through dark places, hidden pipes and bins that know the shape of my thirst better than I do. I stand by the window while I drink, watching the garden wake in slow ripples of light that push the last of the night's shadows back beneath the leaves and stems that hold the memory of every drop I poured into their roots. I wonder where this water was yesterday, what sky it rose from, what stones it slipped past on its hidden journey before it found its way through my faucet and into the quiet space between my hands. The thought settles in my chest with a weight that feels less like burden and more like belonging, a reminder that I am only ever borrowing what has drifted through countless places before me. When the cup is empty, I set it in the sink without rinsing it, leaving the faint trace of what was there to dry in the sun's slow approach. I slip into my boots and step out onto the porch where the air meets me with its cool breath, carrying the smell of damp earth and the faint sweetness of new leaves still unfolding in the soft hush of early day. I listen for the river, but its voice is buried beneath the steady hum of insects warming themselves in the grass, the distant call of a bird announcing that morning has claimed its quiet corner of the world once more. I cross the yard with the bucket swinging low at my side, its metal rim catching the first thin rays of sunlight that slip through the fence boards and dance across the damp soil, waiting patiently for whatever I choose to give it. I kneel near the far row where the ground dips slightly, pressing my palm flat against the cool dirt and feeling the way it yields just enough to remind me it's alive in its own slow way. I pour what I gathered yesterday into the waiting hollow, watching as the water soaks down in thin veins that spread outward like a soft map hidden beneath the surface. I imagine the roots reaching up to meet it, tiny fingers brushing the memory I leave behind with every drop. When the bucket is empty, I set it aside and sit back on my heels, breathing in the hush that settles around me like a blanket stitched from bird calls and leaf rustle, and the faint sigh of the wind moving through the fence slats. I think about the river winding its way through the trees just beyond my sight, its patient spine carrying yesterday's rain toward places I will never stand but somehow feel folded into each time I lift my cup. There is comfort in knowing that what slips from my hands now will find its way back to me in some shape or another, rising as mist above a hidden pond or falling again onto the tin roof when the sky decides it's time to give back what it borrowed for a while. I press my fingers into the damp patch where the water disappeared and feel the earth cool against my skin, the faint pulse of life hidden beneath the dark surface where stones rest and roots tangle in slow conversations I will never hear but trust are always happening. I stand and brush the soil from my palms onto my jeans, the fine dust catching the light in soft motes that drift toward the ground before vanishing into the grass. I carry the empty bucket with me as I follow the narrow path to the river's edge, the same path worn smooth by my own footsteps, and the soft scrape of boots through leaves that remember every tread even if they do not hold it for long. The air grows thicker with the scent of water as I near the bend where the current curves wide and slow, folding the sky's reflection into its restless skin. I stand there for a while, watching the way the sun catches on the ripples, turning them into shifting coins of light that slide past my boots and slip away to places I cannot follow except in thought. I kneel at the edge and dip my fingers in, feeling the cold pull around my knuckles, the gentle insistence that what moves here is older than anything I might hold in my small cup at home. I wonder how many mornings like this have drifted past unnoticed by the river, how many hands have dipped into this same bend to feel the hush slip through their grasp before it carried on without them. I cup a little of it in my palm and let it spill back, watching the droplets shatter the surface into brief circles that widen and fade into the steady drift. I close my eyes and breathe in the smell of moss and wet stone and the faint sweetness of wildflowers that cling to the bank in stubborn clusters. I think about how this water remembers the sky it rose from, the rain that fed the soil beneath my garden, the small drip caught in the bucket waiting by the fence for another soft hush of clouds to give up what they hold. I open my eyes and watch a single leaf drift past, turning lazily in the current as if it knows it has nowhere else to be. I stand and follow the path home, the bucket light in my hand, the hush of the river's voice folding into the soft rhythm of my steps on the path that knows me well enough to guide me without asking where I'm going. When I reach the yard, the sun has climbed just high enough to lay its warmth across the fence line, catching the rim of the empty bucket in a small ring of gold that waits patiently for the next rain, the next slow spill of clouds drifting above this small patch of earth I tend with my hands and my quiet promise to listen. I set the bucket down and step inside, feeling the last cool edge of morning slip off my shoulders as the door closes behind me. The house greets me with its familiar sigh, pipes humming low behind the walls, carrying the river's memory through iron and shadow until it finds its way to my waiting cup. I think about lifting it again soon, tasting the hush folded into every drop, trusting that what moves through me now will drift onward long after I've set it down and stepped once more into the soft promise of another day waiting just beyond the garden fence. Ask ChatGPT. The day moves forward with a softness that makes every minute feel like it could spill over the edges if I am not careful with how I carry it. I stand at the sink, fingers resting on the rim of my cup, feeling the warmth from the last rinse still lingering along the porcelain curve. Outside the window, the garden leans into the sunlight without asking for permission, leaves unfolding wider with each quiet promise of warmth that drifts down from a sky brushed clean of clouds. I watch a bead of water slip from the lip of a leaf, falling in a slow arc that catches the sun just right before it vanishes into the waiting soil. I wonder if the roots feel the drop arrive, if deep below where no eyes reach there is a hush of recognition, a soft touch of gratitude that never needs to be spoken aloud. I fill my cup with water from the tap again, listening to the pipes hum with their hidden current, a secret conversation carried through copper and old joints that bend and sigh under the weight of every drop. The taste is familiar now, metallic in the first breath, then smooth as it settles across my tongue. A reminder that what I hold in my hands has drifted through so many shapes and places to find me here in this quiet kitchen. I carry the cup to the table and sit by the open window where the breeze slips in, warm enough now to stir the edge of the curtain into a lazy dance that brushes my arm every few moments, like a gentle reminder that time is moving even when I pretend it stands still. I set the cup down and press my palms flat against the table's worn surface, feeling the faint grooves and scratches left by years of plates and cups and elbows leaning into stories told long after the sun dropped behind the fence line. I wonder how many cups of water this table has held witness to, how many quiet sips folded into the hush of morning or the soft drift of night, when the only sound was the tick of the old clock above the stove counting seconds, like droplets falling into an endless pool. I lift the cup and drink again, slow and deliberate, letting the cool slip down my throat and settle into the quiet machinery inside me that hums on without asking for praise or permission. I think about how much of me is this water, how every cell knows the shape of a molecule that once drifted as mist above an ocean or rested deep in the shadowed bend of a river I have never seen. The thought steadies me in a way that makes the air feel heavier in my chest but softer too, like being held by something that asks nothing in return except that I keep moving forward with the same patience it carries in its endless drift. I watch a bird land on the fence post just beyond the open window, its small head cocked as if it knows I am watching, as if it can see the way I sit here with my cup and my drifting thoughts tangled in the hush of a day that wants nothing more than to unfold quietly across my skin. It flutters its wings once, scattering a small spray of dust into the air before it lifts again, slipping away over the garden where the leaves shiver at its passing. I wonder if it will find the river's edge, dip its beak where the current bends slow and shallow enough to catch its reflection in the trembling mirror of moving water. I imagine how that same water will drift past roots and stones, and the soft press of soil before rising as mist, when the sun leans closer, folding the memory of that small touch into the larger story that waits to fall again as rain somewhere far from here. I stand and carry my cup back to the sink, rinsing it under the steady slip of the tap that sings its quiet note against porcelain and metal. I watch the last swirl of droplets circle the drain and vanish into the dark, imagining the path they take through narrow pipes and hidden joints that twist and bend beneath the floorboards I stand on barefoot and warm from where the sun has pushed its heat through the thin slats of the porch. I leave the cup by the window this time, a small witness to the way light moves across the kitchen walls in slow arcs that shift the shadows into shapes I do not bother to name. I step outside with the empty bucket in hand, feeling the weight of it light against my palm, the metal rim warm where the sun has pressed its soft breath into the waiting hollow. The garden greets me with the rustle of leaves turning in the breeze, a faint whisper of roots shifting beneath the surface where yesterday's water waits to be pulled deeper by stems that know the shape of thirst better than I ever could. I kneel by the fence and press my palm flat against the soil, feeling the faint pulse of dampness clinging just below where the sun cannot reach. I wonder how far down the water has slipped overnight, how many stones it brushed before settling into pockets of cool earth where it waits to be called upward by roots that spread like slow secrets beneath my feet. I rest the bucket beside me and sit back on my heels, letting the hush of the garden fold itself around my shoulders like a shawl stitched from sunlight and wind and the faint chorus of insects hidden in the grass. I close my eyes and think about the river drifting just beyond the trees, its steady voice carrying pieces of this same sky in the soft promise of a current that never stops moving forward even when I am not there to stand at its edge and listen. I imagine the path each droplet takes, how it slips past stones worn smooth by centuries of drift, how it lifts as mist when the sun calls it upward only to fall again in a hush that touches leaves and roofs, and the thin metal lip of the bucket waiting by my fence for another night's worth of stories to gather. I open my eyes to the sound of a breeze lifting the edge of my hair from my forehead, carrying the smell of water and earth and the faint sweetness of flowers that lean their faces toward the sun without needing to know how long they have left to bloom. I stand and lift the bucket, empty but full in its own quiet way, a reminder that what waits to be caught will always come if I am patient enough to listen. I carry it back toward the house, the path soft beneath my boots, the hush of the yard folding itself around each step, like a promise I have learned not to question. When I reach the porch, I set the bucket down where the sun can touch its rim, warming the metal just enough to remind it that tonight the sky may let go again, a small shower that will tap out its secrets one drop at a time until the hollow is full, and the garden roots hum with the memory of clouds drifting far above the trees. I step inside and find my cup where I left it by the window, lifting it to my lips, though it holds nothing now except the soft scent of the water that passed through it earlier. I hold it there for a moment, imagining the next sip waiting inside a droplet I cannot see yet, a tiny hush that drifts through pipes and river bends, and the secret chambers of clouds that know exactly when to give back what they gather. I set the cup down and breathe in the hush that settles around me, the faint tick of the clock above the stove counting time not as something to spend or lose, but as a slow unfolding that ties each breath to the memory inside every drop of water waiting to find its way home. Ask ChatGPT. Afternoon drifts over the house, like a soft sheet being pulled up over tired shoulders, the light shifting from bright gold to a gentle hush that makes the walls seem closer and kinder somehow. I stand by the back window with my hand resting on the old wooden frame, watching the shadows of leaves play across the sill as the breeze slips through branches that have stood long enough to remember storms and stillness in equal measure. The bucket sits near the fence where I left it, its metal rim catching the last sharp angles of sunlight before dusk has its way with the yard. I like how it waits without complaint, open to whatever the sky might decide to give or keep for itself. Inside the kitchen the air holds a faint trace of warmth from the morning sun that pushed itself through the window, and across the tiles in thin lines that move so slowly you could almost believe time was leaning back for a breath. My cup sits clean by the sink, waiting like the bucket, patient in its small way, ready to hold what the pipes will give when I ask for it. I run a finger along its rim, feeling the smooth edge that knows my mouth better than any words could shape. I fill it from the tap, the hush of water striking porcelain, the only sound strong enough to remind the walls they are not just wood and nail but a vessel too, holding me, and the hum of the old pipes that carry river and rain through hidden veins that never sleep. I lift the cup and drink, letting the cool slip across my tongue and down my throat where it becomes part of the soft work my body does without ceremony, a quiet trade of old for new, dry for quenched, alone for joined in ways too small to see but steady enough to trust. I wonder if the water recognizes the shape of me the way I try to recognize its taste, if each drop hums with the memory of where it was before it bent through the dark curves behind these walls and found my waiting hand. I picture the droplets drifting through pipes like old travelers slipping down familiar roads, brushing against rust and elbowed corners, never stopping but never in a hurry either. Outside the breeze picks up just enough to push the curtain against my arm, a small nudge that makes me think of the river wind I felt on my face this morning, the cool hush of it brushing my cheeks as I stood by the bend where the current widens and lets the sky see itself in slow-moving silver. I carry the cup to the porch and sit on the top step, my boots tucked under me, the wood warm against the back of my legs where the sun held its touch long after the air has turned. From here, I can see the garden and the faint line of trees beyond it that guard the river's secret drift, their trunks dark against the lowering light, their branches shifting just enough to whisper things I can't quite catch but hear all the same. I sip again, and let the water remind me that distance is just a matter of time waiting to change its mind. I think about where this drop might have risen, maybe from a shallow pool hidden beneath ferns in some shaded clearing far upstream, or from the wide mouth of the river where it meets the pull of something larger than itself, an ocean waiting with a patient tug that never grows tired. I imagine a droplet lifted by sun's heat, carried high into the drifting belly of a cloud that roams over fields and roofs, and the hushed corners of forests where no one stands to listen, except the roots and stones, and small things with wings that flicker in and out of sight. Maybe it fell as rain on a far road, slipped from leaf to leaf before finding its way into a hidden stream that feeds the river I stand beside, when the dust pulls me from the house, and toward the hush I cannot ignore. The breeze slips under my collar, and I set the cup down beside me, listening to the faint click it makes when it touches the step. I close my eyes, and let my breath settle into the rhythm of the wind pushing through branches that scratch their slow song against each other. The sound reminds me that even the strongest wood bends a little when asked by something older and larger than itself. I think about bending too, about how each day shapes me with its soft push and pull, how each sip ties me to something that moves beyond my small circle of garden and porch, and the walls that hold my sleep safe while the river carries its hush through the dark. I open my eyes to find the sky holding the deep blue edge that comes just before the first stars speak themselves into being. I like this hour best, when the world feels folded in on itself, close enough that I can almost hear the roots drink below the soil, and the stones sigh under the slow press of years that never ask permission to pass. I stand and lift my cup, tipping the last bit of water onto the garden bed nearest the step, watching the droplets slip from porcelain to leaf, from leaf to soil where it will rest until the roots decide it's time to pull it deeper. I think of it drifting through the hidden dark, brushing past bits of old bark and small insects that build their tiny worlds out of what the earth gives without demand. I leave the cup on the railing and walk barefoot to the fence, feeling the last warmth of the day slip through the planks and into my skin where it settles like a secret promise I do not have to speak to keep. I rest my hand on the rim of the bucket and imagine the first drop landing there tonight, maybe from mist drifting down when the air cools just enough to let go of what had gathered all day while I was busy moving through my hours with thoughts too loud to hear the hush that waits for me now. I stand there until the light folds itself fully into dusk, the garden shadows deepening, the trees beyond the fence holding their soft guard over the path that leads back to the river's edge where I know the current moves without caring whether I stand there to watch or not. When I return to the porch, the cup waits where I left it, a small witness to the way the day has let itself go without complaint. I lift it once more, though it holds nothing now except the faint trace of the river folded into each breath I draw in, the hush of the pipes that will carry the next swallow to my waiting hands when morning comes again. I step inside and close the door against the drift of night, the house wrapping around me with its patient hush, the old clock ticking its soft reminder that time is nothing more than a river we carry inside us, drop by drop, breath by breath, memory by memory, until we find ourselves standing barefoot on cool floorboards listening for the next sip that will remind us we belong to something that moves on whether we notice or not. Ask ChatGPT. The house holds the night close around its old bones while I drift through its quiet rooms, the floor warm in places where the day's heat still clings and cool, where the shadows gather in corners the lamp does not reach. I set my cup by the sink and listen to the faint drip of the tap, a single drop falling every so often with a note that folds itself into the hush, like a heartbeat you only hear when you stand perfectly still. I think about how many drops slip through these pipes every day, each one carrying some soft fragment of the river that bends beyond the trees, a bend that holds my reflection on clear mornings and steals it away at dusk when the current pulls the last light under branches that have known my footsteps long enough to expect them. I fill the kettle, not because I need tea, but because I like the sound it makes when the water begins to tremble inside, a low hum that echoes through the kitchen and up into the beams above my head where cobwebs catch dust motes the sun will find again come morning. The kettle clicks as it finds its steady boil, and I stand with my palms pressed to the counter, feeling the faint vibration of hidden pipes humming just beneath the wood and tile. I pour only enough to warm my hands, the cup holding the soft weight of steam rising into my face and slipping into my hair, as if to remind me I am made mostly of the same thing I cradle now, a quiet truth that feels too big and too small at once. I carry it through the narrow hall toward the back door that opens onto the porch where the bucket waits in the dark, its metal rim catching a faint edge of starlight that finds its way between branches swaying in a breeze too gentle to call wind. I sit on the top step and wrap both hands around the cup, watching the way the steam curls up then drifts away, dissolving into the night air that smells of damp earth and old leaves. Somewhere beyond the fence the river moves, its hush too far to hear, but easy enough to feel in the way the ground holds its cool breath beneath my bare feet. I close my eyes and picture the water slipping past stones shaped by centuries of drift and collision, past roots that reach down like long thin fingers searching for a place to rest. I see the surface catch starlight the same way the bucket catches rain, gathering small pieces of the sky in a quiet promise to carry them forward until they find another place to belong. I lift the cup and drink, tasting the faint memory of heat and the clean slip of water that knows how to move through my throat without ever asking permission to become part of my bones for a while. It humbles me how willingly it gives itself to the hidden work my body does, how it disappears into cells and veins and breath with no complaint or demand, no wish to be more than what it is. When the last sip is gone, I hold the cup against my chest and listen to the dark move around me. An owl calls somewhere deep among the trees, its voice folding through branches that shift and hush like a river bending around a fallen log. I wonder if the owl knows how much of its small body is water too, how every beat of its wing stirs air heavy with droplets I might breathe tomorrow when the sun finds me standing barefoot in the garden with the bucket tilted to catch the first drip of rain that slips from a low cloud drifting lazy above the fence line. I think of that water brushing feathers and leaves before finding its place in the soil where roots wait with a patience I envy on nights like this when my thoughts move too quickly for my tongue to keep up. I set the empty cup beside me and lean forward to rest my elbows on my knees, my eyes searching for the faint flicker of river light between the trees, but finding only the soft throb of starlight pressed into the crown of a pine that leans just enough to catch my breath when the wind shifts. I imagine the river's voice hidden there, a hush wrapped tight around roots and stones, a song older than my first memory of standing at its edge with cold water curling around my ankles, like a patient question I have yet to answer. I stand when the night grows too heavy for my shoulders, lifting the cup and stepping back inside, where the lamp spills a circle of warmth across the floorboards. I rinse the cup beneath the tap, watching the last swirl of steam vanish as the water fills the hollow space before slipping away down the drain, carrying with it the faint warmth of my breath folded into the hush of pipes that never sleep. I set it on the counter to dry and lean against the sink with my eyes closed, feeling the soft tug of sleep gather itself around my temples like a slow tide. Somewhere in the walls, I hear the faint tick of old metal cooling, the gentle shiver of water settling back into stillness behind plaster and brick. I press my palms flat against the countertop and imagine that hush moving through the dark beneath my feet, carrying pieces of my small night toward the river's waiting arms. When I step into the hall, the floor creaks under my weight, a sound that feels like an old friend reminding me I am not the first to pace these boards in the quiet hour between what has been and what waits just beyond the edge of dawn. I pass the window that faces the garden and see the faint outline of the bucket catching what dew the night has gathered, a slow drip that lands so gently I almost think I can hear it if I stand still enough, my breath held tight inside my ribs where the last warmth of the cup still lingers. I slip into my room and sit on the edge of the bed, my hand pressed against the window glass now cold to the touch, the sky beyond holding its scatter of stars, like seeds waiting to be sown into another morning's soft promise. I think about the river drifting unseen through the dark, folding roots and stone into the same hush that waits behind my eyes when sleep finally finds me. I pull the blanket over my shoulders and lie back, my head sinking into the pillow that smells faintly of fresh air and old wood, and the faint echo of steam rising from a cup I will lift again tomorrow when the pipes sigh awake and carry the memory of rain and river and cloud through the hidden veins that tie this old house to everything that moves beyond it. I close my eyes and let the hush drift through me, each heartbeat a soft ripple carrying pieces of myself toward the quiet place where all things slip into each other, where every drop remembers where it came from and where it will go next, folding me gently into a story I do not need to tell to know that I am part of its patient drift, drop by drop, breath by breath, dream by dream. Ask ChatGPT. Morning arrives with a hush so soft I almost don't feel it slip across my skin until I open my eyes and see the faint light pooling against the edge of the curtain where dawn tests its quiet hands against the fabric. I lie there for a moment, listening to the old walls hold their breath while the pipes behind them stir, with the first slow tremor of water waking from its hidden sleep. There's a kind of music in that sound, a patient promise that the world is still turning beneath my floorboards, carrying its hidden veins of river and rain beneath the yard and the trees, and the bend that waits just beyond my fence where roots drink deep and stones remember every footstep I've left along the bank. I slip my feet to the floor and press my palms flat against my knees, feeling the warmth my own skin gives back to me like a small reminder that I too am made of what the river knows, what the clouds gather, what the soil holds in its dark hands until the time is right to let go. In the kitchen my cup waits by the sink where I left it, a clean hollow that catches the soft spill of light through the window, and holds it for just a moment before the breeze moves it along. I turn the tap and listen to the thin slip of water strike porcelain, folding itself into a pool that smells faintly of old pipes and the memory of distant rain. I lift it to my lips and sip, feeling the cool slip through the warmth of my mouth and down into the soft machinery I carry inside me that never asks for thanks but keeps me standing all the same. There's something sacred in that first swallow, something that ties me to the hush that waits beyond the garden where the river hums its slow hymn through roots and stones and shadows that bend without breaking when the current asks them to step aside. I step out onto the porch with my cup held in both hands, the rim catching the early light like a thin silver coin balanced on the edge of a dream I haven't quite let go of yet. The yard smells of new green and old soil, and the faint trace of dew clinging to the rim of the bucket that sits just inside the fence where the night left its quiet offering behind. I like knowing it waits there, a small promise that the sky and the earth still remember how to speak to each other in drips and hushes that slip past my windows while I sleep. I sip again and watch the garden wake in slow folds of shadow and sun, the leaves lifting their faces to the first warm touch that slips through the low branches overhead. A bird lands on the fence post and cocks its head toward me, as if it knows I hold a piece of the river in my hands, the same hush folded into its feathers, when it dips its beak in the shallows and lifts droplets into its small throat before taking flight again. I envy the way it moves without question, wing to branch to sky, each beak carrying it through currents of air and hidden threads of mist that drift unseen above the bend where I will stand again before the day folds itself into dusk. I set my cup on the rail and step down into the grass, the dew soaking through the thin fabric at my ankles where it brushes my skin with a chill that feels honest in a way few things do anymore. I kneel by the bucket and run my fingers along the rim, feeling the faint tremble of cool metal that holds the night's slow gift in its hollow belly. I tip it forward and pour a little at the base of the nearest plant, watching the soil darken and sink, folding the water into itself without hurry or complaint. I wonder how deep it will drift before it meets a root waiting like an open hand beneath the surface where no eye can follow. I stand and lift the bucket, feeling the weight shift against my palm as I carry it along the fence line, pouring a little here and there, each spill a soft conversation between me and the ground that holds more stories than I will ever know. I like the way the water disappears, slipping past pebbles and old knots of root, carrying my small offering into the same hidden paths that lead all the way back to the river if you know how to listen. When the bucket is empty, I rest it upside down on the fence post, letting the sun find its cold rim and warm it for whatever the sky might give back tonight. When the dark slips over the yard, and the trees whisper their slow secrets to the drift of clouds passing overhead, I walk the narrow path through the garden, stepping between rows where green shoots lean into the promise of more light, more warmth, more hush folded into the shape of a droplet waiting to be called upward again when the sun decides it is time. At the end of the path I stand and look toward the river, knowing its bend waits beyond the trees where the air grows cool even when the sun sits high above the yard. I finish the last sip from my cup and let the rim rest against my lower lip for a moment longer, tasting the faint trace of metal and memory before I lower it and breathe in the hush that settles around my shoulders like a thin blanket of mist drifting up from the hidden currents that carry what I cannot see but trust is always moving toward me. I step back inside and place the empty cup on the counter beside the sink, a small anchor holding the shape of what it once held, a promise that it will hold more when I turn the tap again and listen for the soft hum of pipes carrying the river's voice through the dark veins behind these old walls. I stand there a moment longer with my palm resting on the cool porcelain, eyes closed to the sound of the house breathing around me, with sighing, water ticking through copper that knows how to bend without breaking. I open my eyes when the sun catches the far corner of the kitchen, throwing light across the floor in slow-moving shapes that remind me of the way ripples fold themselves into the bend where I stand at dusk, the hush of the current wrapping my ankles when I slip off my boots and step into the shallows just to feel the drift of something older than my name pull at my skin in a way that feels like belonging. I leave the cup where it is and step through the house on quiet feet, past windows that hold the sky in small square frames, each one bending the light into corners where dust drifts, like tiny seeds waiting for breath to stir them into the next soft place they will rest. I open the back door and step onto the porch again, letting the warm boards hold my weight while I lean against the rail and watch the garden breathe beneath me, leaves trembling at the edge of a breeze that smells faintly of river stones, and the hush of water slipping past roots that hold tight to the bank so they don't drift too far from the place they were first pressed into the earth. I close my eyes and stand there long enough to feel my own pulse fold into the hum of the yard, the faint drip of last night's dew still clinging to the rim of the bucket now drying in the slow spread of sunlight that promises it will all come back again if I am patient enough to listen for it. I open my eyes when a shadow passes overhead, a bird or a drifting leaf. I can't be sure, but I watch it slip through the light and vanish behind the fence where the path bends toward the place I know I will walk again before this day gives itself to night, and the river hums its soft reminder that what moves away always finds its way back if you let it drift long enough to remember the shape of home. Ask ChatGPT. Afternoon folds itself over my shoulders like a quiet shawl as I stand by the porch rail, one hand resting on the warm wood while the other holds my empty cup, like a small promise that there is always more waiting to be poured if I am patient enough to listen for it. The yard hums with the low sound of insects drifting between leaves that lift their green faces to the sun's soft hand, each stem a small vein pulling what it needs from the damp dark beneath my boots. I can almost hear the roots stretching themselves deeper with each breath I draw in, threading through soil that still remembers the hush of rain slipping past stones that hold the cold shape of river memory in their rough skins. I step down into the grass and feel it bend beneath my bare feet, the blades pressing cool against my arches before springing back as if to say they were never troubled by my passing weight. The bucket sits by the fence where I left it in the morning sun, its metal rim warming under the slow touch of daylight that has traveled so far just to kiss this small circle of my garden. I lift it and feel how the bottom holds a shallow pool of what the night left behind, a thin echo of dew that dripped from the wide leaves when the sky was still dark and the stars drifted unseen above my roof. I tip it forward and watch the last drops slip into the soil, vanishing almost before they touch the surface, as if the earth was thirsty for this hush carried in silver threads that weave between root and stone far below where my eyes cannot follow. I imagine each drop finding its way through narrow cracks and dark hollows, brushing against the slow secrets held tight by roots that know how to drink without asking for more than what the sky is willing to give. I leave the bucket upside down on the fence post where the breeze will dry its metal skin, ready for whatever the next dusk or dawn decides to offer when the air cools, and the clouds lean close enough to speak. I walk the edge of the yard with my hands brushing the tops of tall grass that trembles at my touch, a thin music of dry blades rubbing against each other, while the sun folds itself lower through the trees at the far end where the path slips toward the bend in the river I have not yet visited today. I think of it waiting there, a patient spine of moving hush pulling pieces of sky and leaf and distant rain through its hidden channel, carrying them beyond my knowing yet leaving just enough behind for my feet to find when I stand at its edge and kneel to dip my hand beneath the trembling skin that never stops remembering where it came from. I pause by the garden bed, where green stems catch the last gold light, their leaves trembling with a quiet hunger for the day's final warmth before night lifts its dark blanket over them, and the roots settle into their secret work of pulling what they need from the soft veins of damp earth that hold my small offerings of water deep in their patient hands. I crouch there with my palm pressed to the soil, feeling how it gives just enough beneath my weight to remind me that nothing here is truly still, that every breath and drop and root slip through each other in a drift so slow it might be mistaken for silence by anyone who does not know how to wait. I stand and follow the narrow path through the trees, where the air cools the sweat at the nape of my neck, carrying the smell of river stone and moss, and the faint sweetness of wet leaves turning their hidden faces to the sky above. The branches shift above my head, a soft conversation that brushes my shoulders when I pass too close, their thin fingers catching at the sleeves of my shirt like a gentle tug asking me to linger just a moment longer beneath the green hush. I do not hurry. The river does not ask me to. It waits in its slow bend beyond the last row of trees where the ground dips, and the hush thickens into that quiet voice that hums through my feet before I even see the water slip past roots that hold the bank together with a patient grip that bends but does not break. I step down to the edge and stand where the mud presses cool and forgiving beneath my soles, the water close enough to catch my reflection in small broken pieces that drift apart each time the current folds itself over a buried stone. I watch the river carry the sky in trembling shards that catch the sun's low light and break it into slivers that flicker and vanish before rejoining the hush beneath the surface where no eyes follow. I kneel and dip my fingers into the flow, feeling how it accepts my touch without question, slipping around my knuckles and filling the spaces between my bones with its cold promise that what moves away always returns in some shape I may not recognize, but will know all the same when it slips past my lips and settles into the soft hollows of my chest. I lift my hand and let the drops fall back, each one folding into the drift that will carry it beyond this bend, beyond my garden, beyond the reach of my waiting cup, yet never so far that it forgets the shape of my breath when it rises again in mist or rain or a thin slip of dew on the rim of the bucket I will lift tomorrow at dawn. I sit on a broad stone warmed by the sun's final touch and close my eyes, letting the sound of the current fold into my pulse until they hum as one thing, a low river that drifts through me as easily as it drifts through root and stone and pipe behind the kitchen wall where my cup waits to catch the next hush that finds its way to my lips. I think about the house behind me holding its quiet breath until I return, the walls remembering the soft clatter of the tap, the sigh of pipes pushing each drop through the narrow maze of copper and rusted joints that know how to bend without losing their way. I wonder how many mornings I have stood at that sink without knowing how far the water has traveled to greet my waiting hands. How many nights I have lifted my cup without hearing the hush folded inside each swallow that ties me to this bend, this garden, this slow drift of light slipping into dusk where my small body sits and listens for the river's soft reminder that memory lives in every drop that slips through me. I open my eyes when the sky folds itself into dusk, the first stars drifting through the branches above my head like tiny notes of silver pinned to a dark fabric that breathes as I breathe, that hums as I hum, that remembers as I remember each step back up the path toward the house that waits with its warm lamp and its old floor that knows my footfalls by heart. I stand and brush the river's touch from my hands, carrying its cool hush with me in the soft spaces between my ribs where tomorrow's breath will wait to find me standing once more at the edge of what moves away only to return, a memory shaped like water slipping through my cup into the warm dark of my open hands. Ask ChatGPT. I follow the path home from the river, with the hush still clinging to my skin like a cool mist that refuses to lift even as I step back into the warmth waiting near the garden fence, where the last light drapes itself across the tops of tall grass swaying with the breeze that rises as dusk begins to settle its gentle weight across the yard. My empty hands remember the feel of water slipping through my fingers, the patient cold that does not cling yet leaves behind a small mark deep enough to carry back through the trees and into the quiet rooms that wait with the soft tick of the old clock above the stove and the faint rattle of pipes that still hold the echo of every drop drawn from the tap since the first boards of this house were nailed together. I pause at the fence line, letting my fingertips brush the rim of the bucket where it sits empty now except for a single droplet clinging stubbornly to the curve of metal, catching the last stray spark of light before the wind lifts it free and folds it into the earth below. I wonder if that drop remembers where it rose from, if it holds the taste of a cloud drifting low over fields I have never seen, or the hush of a river bend far upstream where stones rest under the cold press of a current that hums the same soft promise I carry now, like a secret in the spaces between my ribs. The garden breathes around me as I step through rows of green leaning into the dusk, each leaf trembling just enough to catch the edge of wind slipping between stems and soil, carrying with it the faint scent of roots and the hidden work they do, while I stand here with bare feet pressing shallow shapes into damp dirt that will smooth itself out by morning, as if I was never here at all. I bend low and touch the base of one wide leaf still wet with a thin thread of moisture left behind by the day's slow breath. A reminder that what the sun lifts it always gives back if you wait long enough to feel it slip free under your fingertips. I straighten and draw in a long breath that tastes of green things and earth, and the distant hush of river water folding itself around roots that reach for what drifts unseen beneath the shallow skin of this yard. I carry the memory of that taste with me up the porch steps and into the house where the walls hold the night close, the corners deepened by the absence of sun, the air shaped by the soft hush of pipes that never truly sleep even when the lights are low and my hands move slow to lift my cup from where I left it near the sink. I run the tap for a moment just to hear the soft strike of water against porcelain, a note so familiar now it feels like an old song humming through my palms when I press them against the edge of the counter. The water comes clear and cold, carrying its faint metallic echo that reminds me it has brushed rust and copper, and the cool stone of hidden reservoirs I will never stand beside yet trust completely each time I lift my cup to drink. I sip in the quiet that fills the space between the steady tick of the clock and the small sounds of the night pressing its weight against the windows where the glass holds my faint reflection, a shape caught just long enough to remind me I am here and nowhere else. Part of this slow drift that ties pipe to river to sky in ways I cannot name, but feel in every swallow that carries the hush of distant rain into the soft machinery that keeps my heart steady without asking for thanks. I stand at the window and watch the yard blur into shadow, the outline of the fence now little more than a darker line against the deeper dusk that settles into the soil and folds itself around the roots and stones waiting below for tomorrow's promise of dew or drizzle, or the soft slip of mist that rises when the air remembers it can hold no more. I wonder if the garden dreams when the night leans close, if each leaf curls a little tighter when the stars press their cold light through branches swaying above the path I walk each evening toward the bend that knows my footsteps as well as the porch knows the quiet weight of my boots set side by the door before I step inside to stand barefoot on cool wood that hums faintly with the memory of rain drumming the roof long before I called this house mine. I finish my cup and rinse it clean, letting the last trickle swirl around the shallow basin before it slips away through pipes that bend in hidden places, carrying this small echo of me back toward the river's waiting spine. I picture that swirl drifting under yards and roads and quiet corners of the land where roots split the soil in narrow veins that feel like old maps drawn by a hand that knew how to listen to what moves unseen beneath the surface. I place the cup upside down on the towel by the sink and let my fingers rest there for a moment, tracing the smooth rim that catches the kitchen light in a soft circle before it fades back into shadow. I step out to the porch again and breathe in the hush, feeling the air brush my cheek with the promise of rain that might come if the clouds decide to open their small hidden hands while I sleep. The bucket waits by the fence, empty but not forgotten, its metal belly turned upward like a quiet question only the sky can answer. I stand at the rail and lean forward, elbows pressing into the wood still warm enough to remind me that today was bright and generous in its giving, a slow spill of sun that lifted moisture from soil and leaf only to promise it would send it back when the wind turns and the hush gathers itself in silver threads drifting down through dark branches. I let my eyes drift closed and feel the river hum beneath my feet even here, its voice folded into the roots that press deep into the earth below the garden, where worms twist and stones hold the soft memory of water slipping past in the hush of darkness too far down for my hands to reach. I think of tomorrow waiting to unfold itself in drops and breath, and the soft strike of water against my cup when I stand at the sink with sleep still clinging to my shoulders, and the old pipes sigh awake to greet me with the hush that carries the river's patient promise through copper and rust, and the steady dark that binds this small house to everything that moves beyond its quiet walls. When the wind shifts I breathe it in, and taste the edge of moisture hiding there, the first thin thread of mist gathering in the folds of night that slip through branches above the fence where the bucket waits to hold what the sky decides to let go, while I dream of roots and stones, and the soft hush of water drifting through my open hands into the shape of another day waiting to be poured and lifted and tasted in the hush that lives inside every drop. Ask ChatGPT. The night settles with a softness that feels almost like a hand pressed gently against the back of my neck as I stand by the porch rail for one last breath of air before sleep pulls me inside. The garden lies quiet beneath the slow drift of starlight breaking through thin clouds that drift like scraps of old cloth tugged loose by wind moving high above where my eyes cannot follow. I hear the faint creak of the bucket rocking once on its perch by the fence, a hollow sound that reminds me it waits with its open mouth turned upward for whatever the sky might offer before dawn calls it back into my hands again. I let my fingers rest against the rail, the wood cool now where the day's warmth has slipped away into the hush gathering in every small shadow stretching toward the roots hidden beneath the garden's dark skin. Somewhere in the house behind me the pipes shift with a soft tick, a reminder that even when the world sleeps there is always something moving unseen, carrying pieces of the river and rain through bends and joints that remember more than I ever will. I think of the cup waiting in the kitchen where I left it drying on the towel, its rim turned to catch the faint spill of lamplight that drifts from the window above the sink. I imagine the faint ring of water it holds in memory, a ghost of the sip that slipped through me earlier, folding a hush into my chest that hums even now as I stand barefoot on boards that know the shape of my feet as well as the garden knows the shape of my shadows stretched thin by dusk. I step off the porch and cross the yard, grass cool against my soles, bending beneath my weight then lifting again as if to say it never minded my passing at all. The bucket greets me with its quiet mouth turned to the sky, catching the faint brush of moisture carried in the breeze that smells of wet stone and distant places where the river bends beyond my knowing. I rest my palm on the metal rim, feeling its thin chill seeping into my skin, a small pulse of cold that reminds me how much of this world drifts through me unnoticed while I move through hours that feel too busy to hold every small detail worth listening to. I picture the droplet forming on the edge of a leaf above the garden, fattening with the promise of tomorrow's hush until gravity calls it down to strike the bucket's waiting skin with a note so soft only the soil and the roots will remember it landed at all. I turn back to the house and pause at the garden's edge, my eyes tracing the faint line of the path that winds through tall grass to the bend in the river I visit, when the world feels too loud to hold in my hands alone. I know it waits there now in the dark, carrying the slow breath of water slipping past stones that have held their place longer than my memory can stretch, humming its song beneath the hush of leaves shifting overhead, like small sails catching a current of wind that moves without asking permission. I think about how many nights the river has drifted past without me there to watch it bend, how many droplets have lifted from its back to join the sky only to fall again in another place I will never stand yet feel folded into my chest each time I lift my cup and taste the hush inside every swallow. I step onto the porch again, my feet brushing the worn wood that remembers every season that has leaned its weight against this small house built sturdy enough to stand through storms, and soft enough to carry the hush of quiet nights in its bones. I slip inside, and close the door behind me, the latch catching with a soft click that feels more like a promise than a barrier, a reminder that inside these walls the world holds itself steady around my sleep, while the pipes hum their slow secrets through copper veins hidden just beyond the touch of my fingertips. The kitchen greets me with its faint warmth, the old clock above the stove marking time not in minutes, but in small drops that echo, the slow tick of water dripping through stone somewhere deep beneath the bend where roots drink and fish slip through the hush without leaving a trace behind. I lift my cup from the towel and run my thumb along the rim, feeling the faint rough edge where years of small collisions have worn a soft groove that fits my mouth so well it feels like it was made just for this hush I carry from room to room when the world beyond my door hums with too many voices I do not wish to hear. I set it by the tap and fill it one last time, listening to the stream strike porcelain with a note that folds itself into the pipes and the walls, and the floor beneath my feet where I stand breathing in the hush that drifts up through every hidden place that holds this house together. I sip slowly, feeling the water settle into the soft space behind my ribs where the river hums its memory through my blood, a small echo of stone and mist, and the quiet promise that nothing truly leaves if you remember to listen for its return. I think of the droplets sliding from leaf to bucket, of the roots holding their hidden breath below the garden, of the bend waiting in the dark with its spine curved gentle beneath the weight of stars reflected in ripples that drift past my absence without complaint. I finish the cup and rinse it once more, the swirl of water carrying my small hush back through the drain and into pipes that know how to guide it forward without ever losing its way. I leave it upside down on the towel again, its rim catching the lamplight for just a breath before I flick the switch and let darkness gather the corners into shapes that feel softer when I stand still enough to notice. I move through the quiet hall and pause at the window where the glass holds my faint reflection layered over the deeper hush beyond the yard where the bucket waits with its mouth open to the night. I press my palm against the cold pane and feel the way it gives nothing back except my own warmth pressed thin against the hush folded between inside and out. I step into my room and lie down with my head turned toward the window crack just wide enough to let the river's distant breath drift through the screen, brushing my hair where it spills across the pillow that knows the weight of my dreams as well as the river knows the pull of the moon bending its spine in slow tides that hum far beneath my sleep. I close my eyes and let the hush move through me, each breath a small drop folding into the soft drift that carries memory through root and stone and pipe, and the thin rim of my cup waiting by the sink for morning's first spill of light. I drift off listening for the faint note of the first droplet striking the bucket, trusting that the hush will hold me while I sleep, that when I wake the water will wait in the tap, in the river, in the soil, and the slow veins of hidden pipes, ready to remind me that every sip is a promise that what moves through me now has always been here, and will always return if I stand still long enough to lift it to my lips and taste the quiet memory inside every drop of water. Ask ChatGPT.